Here's a little bit of a history lesson to kind of give us a background in the history of psychology, or even further back, philosophy, just to give us an idea of how this field of industrial organizational psychology comes to light. Okay, so the ancient philosophers that really set the tone for our modern thinking were Aristotle and Plato. Well, Plato and Aristotle, because Plato was, well, let's say Socrates was a teacher of Plato, Plato was a teacher of Aristotle. So we'll talk about Plato and Aristotle. And they had some radically different views of the world. Plato, he felt that the only way you could discover truth in the universe was to turn inside yourself and find the answer. See, he believed, very briefly, Plato believed that before you were born, your soul dwelled in heaven with the forms. The forms are pure truth. Okay? He argued that Plato argued there's no way you could ever discover truth here on this planet. Because let's take just the very simplest thing, what is a dog? Okay? And so Plato would say if you look around and find five dogs, they're all different from each other, radically different from each other. So, what do you mean? How are you ever going to find truth here on this earth when you've got five different answers to the exact same question, what is a dog? Instead, there is a truth to a dog in the heavens. And before you were born, your soul dwelled there and knows the truth. And therefore, do not look here on earth to find truth. You will find five different truths. You want truth, turn inside yourself and find it. Aristotle, on the other hand, made it quite the opposite and said, if you want to discover truth, you need to look at all the dogs you can find. Look at 100 dogs and find what they have in common. Four legs, fur, tail, I don't know. Keep all of the features. And find what, not just 100, but 1,000 dogs, 1,000,000 dogs. Find out what commonality 1,000,000 dogs has. And that is the truth. And this is really the basis of things such as using the sample mean, Oh, what is the opinion of these, what is the opinion of? And so you gather 100 people, ask their opinion, and get the average, and you say that is the truth. And so we find that Plato put together this notion of introspection. Turn inside yourself to find the answer, because when you were born, you already had it. Aristotle says all truth has to be discovered here in this earth. Now, clearly, Plato and Aristotle set up the two major competing philosophies of the Middle Ages, and that is empiricism and rationalism. So, Plato set up the basis for rationalism, and rationalism says if you want to discover truth, turn inside yourself. You have it. Empiricism essentially says that the truth comes from the world around you. Okay? Well, Francis Bacon in the 17th century, he says, look, we're going to have this fight between empiricism and rationalism. And I mean, obviously, I've taken the entire field of philosophy and crunched it down into an incredibly simplistic phrase here. But this is the main fight that was going on. And Francis Bacon realized that he could put these together using something that we now call science. Okay? He says you generate theories using rationalism. You turn inside yourself, you search for commonalities and common features. You use empiricism when you collect research data. Okay? So you test the theories using empiricism. So clearly he put this thing together, and a very interesting side note, when Francis Bacon first put together science, nobody knew what it was. They wondered, is this a new kind of philosophy, a new religion? Some people tried to make churches to a church of science. Like, okay, they didn't know what to do with this. Okay, but anyway, here's the thing. Francis Bacon says, science should change the world for the better. That is the point of science. There is no other reason for science to exist but to improve our world. Okay? Because scientific laws allow us to understand and control. It goes like this. If you know A causes B, it goes like this. Do you like B? I know how to make B happen. Turn on A. Is B a bad thing? I don't like B. I know what to do. Turn off A. Pretty straightforward. If you establish this simple scientific law, A causes B, you are in control of the world. Okay? So Francis Bacon argued that science is going to produce the knowledge necessary for technology to develop. So he laid out these two different types of research. We call them basic and applied research. He called them experimenta lucifera, experiments of light, and experimenta fructifera, experiments of fruit. Okay? And so he argued that you first do basic research to establish the facts. Then once you have those facts, you apply them to improve the world. Okay? So he argued that scientific activity should be supported by public funds. And to this day, basic research, experiments of fruit, experiments of light, are funded by the public, right? That in places such as the National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Mental Health, etc. Okay? Well, flash forward a little bit, and you've got a little bit of early psychology. And again, but one of the early psychologists was Edward Titchener, and he was a dominant person in the sense that if Titchener said yes, then the answer was yes, okay? And nobody would question this guy. And he was a pure scientist, a basic researcher. He did not think that psychology was ready to leave the laboratory. He felt it was too fragile still. But the universities were saying, okay, we keep paying your salary every month, but you're not giving us anything. You're just taking money and not paying. And so despite the fact that Edward Titchener deeply did not want this thing to happen, it was inevitable that psychology was going to have to go from a purely basic discipline into more of an applied discipline. Okay? So one of the earliest research that really got it started was Harry Hollingsworth. His original work actually was with the Coca-Cola company. That Coca-Cola was using caffeine, all right, and the USDA, the United States Drug Administration, I don't know. Anyway, they sued Coca-Cola for selling a product which was injurious to health. All right, that was their words, and so a very interesting thing was they hired Harry Hollingsworth to prove that caffeine was not injurious to health, and so he did a variety. The first applied psychology studies, where he administered caffeine to people in like double-blind studies, and then he would measure all kinds of behavioral characteristics and all kinds of outcomes, and he was able to demonstrate that Coca-Cola, or rephrase that, caffeine, does not cause injury to health. Okay. But later on, he went on to some other stuff, and some of his earliest things were like how to interview a farmer, all right? Perfume on emotions, right? The correct height for workbenches. Yeah, that seems like an I.O. topic to me, right? The best color for a railroad to paint its boxcars. The difference between buying habits of men and women. Don't make me get started on that one. Oh my gosh. So the selection of clerks. So clearly much of this falling into the realm of I.O. psychology. Okay? Excellent.